So it's the weekend of the Spanish Grand Prix. The action on track has been about as exciting as counting the brain cells on a Euros football pitch. But that's okay, as we've finally been promised an answer to one of F1 2024's most intriguing plot threads. What's happening with Carlos Sainz? The Spaniard has been chilling in the homeless shelter since Maranello decided to place their future in the hands of British Greta Thunberg here, despite coming into this season as the only man to have taken the fight to Max Verstappen in the last 12 months and won. Probably because they never went side by side at Singapore. His home Grand Prix appeared to be the perfect place to finally make that all-important announcement. Would he cup James Vowles' throbbing scrotum at Williams, or take the gamble presented by Steak/Kick/Sauber/Audi? Both on ideal options, at least in the short term, and over the last few weeks we've seen the potential doors at the top teams gradually close shut on the Spaniard. Mercedes are too busy fantasising over a 17-year-old, and Red Bull have retained this useless sack of shit. In the press conference ahead of the weekend, Sainz claimed he was tired of being stuck in limbo, and it was time to make a decision. Cue several reporters getting tip-offs of an inevitable announcement on Saturday, and it looked as if Carlos had finally made his mind up and would be signing with Williams for 2025. But Saturday came and went, with no announcement and a bunch of eager journalists looking rather red in the face on Twitter. It begs the rather obvious question: what happened? Did Alpine steal their thunder by announcing the return of an Epstein side character? Well, not exactly, but the baguettes aren't quite off the hook here. While it looked all but certain Sainz had agreed a deal to race with Williams from next year, it turns out Alpine might just have thrown their hat in at the last second, and potentially triggered a late change of heart from the Spaniard. Whether this is true or not though, Carlos's indecisiveness might just have cost him his Formula One future. So if you remember, around the Canadian Grand Prix, Williams team principal James Vowles couldn't get Sainz's dick out of his mouth. It was more than clear the Grove-based outfit were targeting the outbound Ferrari man, and that he was their number one prospect for 2025, meaning if they now hire anyone else, when they claim how they're the perfect fit in their press release, we'll all know that was a massive f***ing lie. While struggling to stay relevant in the midfield fight, there was reason for optimism if you're one of the surviving Williams fans from the 90s, as the team have gone on a massive hiring spree ahead of the new regulations in 2026, which appears to have been achieved by setting up an adult pedo van outside Alpine's headquarters. The new rules are expected to massively shake up the field, and Williams' current slump might actually be a good thing, as a lower position in the championship this year would unlock more wind tunnel allocation as they develop the 2026 machine next season. Problem is, while they may have that additional development time, it's whether the team know how best to use it, and they still have some of the most outdated facilities on the entire grid. I should know, I got to look around the place when I went there for a job interview a few years back, which I was promptly rejected from and am taking incredibly well indeed. If we compare this to Audi's offer though, it still makes sense as to why Carlos was siding more with the Williams idea. What the Grove-based team have managed to do with a literal Excel spreadsheet, Sauber haven't managed despite having much better resources and not having their drivers perform additional crash tests on new upgrades. After those two, it didn't look like there was a better offer out there on the table, but actually there was, and it was hiding in plain sight. Alpine started this season doing its absolute best to make itself out as the least attractive prospect on the grid. They built a car which was literally slower than its previous generation, promptly sacked what felt like half of its workforce, threw an underpowered engine in the back, and then allowed its two world-class drivers to drive like they're high off their tits from Glastonbury. Oh, and have I mentioned how they're French yet? But while Ocon and Gasly may have been trying to catapult each other into the Monaco harbour, that weekend still posed as a massive turning point in their season so far. Pierre survived the civil war to bring home crucial points for the team, and hasn't left the top 10 since then. With both cars making it into Q3 in the last two events, it's clear we've come a long way from the carbon fibre boxes filling out the last rows of the grid in the early rounds of the season. By Austria, it's clear to see this Alpine pace is no fluke, and arguably they've made some of the biggest gains of anyone compared to the start of the year. Granted, they couldn't have got much worse, but that level of progress, plus the return of a figure like Flavio Briatore and the prospect of them throwing that French excuse of an engine off a cliff for 2026, well, that might just be particularly enticing to a driver like Carlos Sainz. And so the rumours began. Alpine had thrown in a last-minute bid and were now trying to get the Spaniard away from his deal with Williams. We should expect an announcement fairly soon then. But in that case, well, where is it? Cut to after the Austrian Grand Prix, and it appears as if James Vowles has opened new wank banks for Esteban Ocon and Valtteri Bottas, both safe bets who have established links with the ex-Mercedes strategy director. Alpine, meanwhile, are still testing the likes of Mick Schumacher and Jack Doohan in old ground effect machinery to gauge whether they would be a better fit alongside Gasly in 2025. All the while, Sainz hasn't been helping himself by trying to negotiate a short one-year deal, basically telling his quarters that he has about as much faith in them as Joe Biden's party have in Joe Biden. The Audi deal also looks in jeopardy, with the German manufacturer publicly giving Sainz a deadline to make up his mind, a deadline that passed weeks ago and has led to the outfit pursuing other options for next season. That leaves us with a very real chance then that Carlos has played himself out of Formula 1 for 2025. And at that point, getting back on the grid will be a grueling uphill battle, not won by many drivers his age in the past. The sad reality is, Sainz has relied too much on his stock and has now potentially left things too late to do anything with it. Despite that victory in Melbourne earlier in the year, the Spaniard's pace since then hasn't turned so many heads, with the imminent arrival of Kimi Antonelli and, ironically, Sainz's Saudi Arabian replacement Ollie Behrman has meant someone's going to end up pulling the short straw and end up next to Logan Sargent on the sidelines for next year. It's important to note that those doors at both Williams and Alpine aren't shut just quite yet, but Carlos needs to make up his mind, and urgently, or he risks falling down the long road that ends in Formula E. That would be a huge shame for a driver that shouldn't need to be ousted from Ferrari in the first place, especially when you consider #blessed presentation on the history of Wash so far in 2024. But this is Formula 1. The sport is cutthroat and won't wait around for you to mind map your options if you're not careful. If you want my honest opinion on all this, I'd say as things stand, Carlos stands the best chance of snagging that second Alpine ride for next year. Like all his other options, it's a gamble and could fall one of many ways. But if the Spaniard isn't quick about it, there's a very real chance he finds himself staying in that homeless shelter for the long run. And frankly, that would be a massive shame. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this one though, so let me know down in the comments below and over on the poll I've set up on my community page. If you're new here and enjoyed the video, I'm trying to hit 150,000 subscribers before the end of this season. Okay, I've just made that number up, but it would be cool if we did hit that, so get subscribed for more. A massive thank you as well goes out to all of my patrons and channel members who get videos like these early and previews to the rest of my content. If you want to get involved, then all the relevant links are down in the description below. Now, unless we get any breaking news ahead of the weekend, I'll be back on Sunday with a comedy review for the 2024 British Grand Prix. But until then, have a good one.